We have spent our entire lives learning. But have you ever stopped to think about how your brain actually learns and remembers? What is it that happens biologically inside your brain when you learn something new? Your brain has about 100 billion neurons, probably more. When these neurons are connected together, they can pass signals. And the process of passing 100 trillion signals is what happens when we think. These connections are constantly changing and being rewired. As we experience something new, new connections are formed, and our brain has a new way of passing signals and thinking. Our brains are designed to learn. When you listen to, talk about, or practice something, the neurons in your brain grow fibers, and they're called dendrites. These are basically the wires that connect neurons together. So if you have two neurons and they're both growing dendrites, well, those dendrites might make a connection and now allow signals to pass. But what's really important here is that dendrite growth is only temporary unless a connection is made. So when you're learning, these dendrites are growing, but it's not like an instantaneous process where suddenly you now have neuron connections. You do need to learn long enough to let the dendrite grow. So when you spend time learning, dendrites grow large enough to reach other dendrites, and boom, a connection is made. But even though messages can now be sent, initially that connection is pretty weak, and the message might get lost. So how do we improve that connection? The key is, to improve the connection between neurons, we need practice. When you practice what you have learned, the connections that were made in the learning process become stronger. And we're about to get deep into some biology here. When you practice, a few things happen. The contact area between the dendrites grows wider, and that means that there's more surface area. Think about having a baseball glove. The bigger the baseball glove, the more you can catch those balls. So the dendrite gets wider when you practice, so there's more surface area to get the message. The dendrite also goes thicker. The thicker dendrite means that you can have messages pass faster, and there's less interference from whatever's happening in the other dendrites of neurons nearby. As well, brain scientists say that when you practice, dendrites can form more than one connection with the same neurons, or between the same neurons. And this means that messages are stronger and more permanent. So a quick summary of that brain biology. When you learn, your brain attempts to, and hopefully makes new connections. Initially, those connections are weak and temporary. You can improve the strength and duration of those connections when you practice what you've learned. Here's something interesting to think about. One reason why we dream, as far as we know so far, is so that the brain can test out these new connections. So when you're dreaming, your brain is sending pulses and signals, and it's making sure that the new connections you made that day are working right. That's sort of an interesting thing to think about, and it probably explains why if I spent the day playing Tetris, I'm going to dream about playing Tetris. So, enough biology. Let's talk about how to use this understanding of brain learning to learn better as students. So the first thing that's really important that brain scientists tell us is that you need to practice on the same day that you learn. So we know that learning grows the dendrites and makes a connection if you learn for enough time, but then you also need to practice to make sure that those connections are strong and permanent. Apparently, without practice, 20 minutes after learning something, you're only going to remember 60% of it. And a day later, if you haven't practiced, you're down to 30% memory. And yet, if you practice what you have learned within 24 hours of learning it, you can remember 80% or more. Second major point is that what you do when you practice matters. So again, looking at brain theory and those biologists, you grow dendrites for exactly the same thing you are practicing. And this is, to me, really an important point when I think about my math students. If you listen to or watch while someone else does math problems, then you're going to remember how to listen to or watch someone else doing math problems. That's great, but it doesn't really help you in the long run. If you practice solving problems yourself, then you grow dendrites for solving problems. And that's much more important, that you know how to solve when you need to. So that's how you have to practice. And here's something else significant about the way you study. Our brains crave social interaction. We are very social creatures by nature. So when you are putting aside practice time to practice for school, don't allow social distractions. Even a single message, so a single tweet, a single text, a single Snapchat, is going to refocus your brain away from the learning you're trying to do, because your brain loves that social stuff. So I'm sorry to be the person to say this, I'm probably not the first, but when you are putting aside to practice your schoolwork or anything else that's really important to practice, make sure you are disconnected from social media. Your phone is charging in another room, and you're not waiting for that next Snapchat. Another important point is that the brain, you need to do something active to learn. Being passive doesn't help you learn. Dendrites will only grow when you are actively doing something. If you remember, I talked about how dendrites grow when you do something, practice something, try something, write something, listen to something. Those are all active things. You're not going to grow dendrites by just hoping it'll sink in through osmosis. Have you seen this? Pretty cool. So here's an interesting thing to think about. Did this guy learn how to do this by watching someone else do it over and over again? Or do you think he maybe, I don't know, practiced? Next major point. Dendrites don't grow in a void. Your new skills need to connect to your old skills. So this is really important, especially for me as a math teacher, because you need to have the necessary dendrites in place so that new material doesn't go right over your head. If you're trying to learn something that is completely and totally new to you, it's not going to stick in your head because there's no dendrites for it. There's no neurons existing that are trying to make those dendrite connections. And again, that's really important when you think about the accumulation of math knowledge. Your ability to understand math and apply the math we learned this year really depends on how well you understood math last year. Make sure you take time to review what you've learned in previous math courses if you need to. Next major point, we've talked about this one, dendrites take time to grow. It takes time to make strong connections. Having a regular schedule is important because you want the dendrite for exponent laws to be incredibly strong before you try to apply those exponent laws in new ways. And what's really important here, you can't just cram everything into your brain in one sitting. You're supposed to be learning at a regular pace so that the new dendrites have time to form and grow strong before you add the next level of learning. You may make connections that are kind of not quite right. So be careful not to leave everything to the last minute and cram. It just doesn't work. Our brains don't like it. Another important point is that mistakes are actually good. If you make a mistake and you learn quickly what the mistake is and how to avoid it, that is an ultimate way of testing the connections and reinforcing those dendrite connections. Without the feedback, you might make a connection that's wrong. Uh-oh. And the next major important point, and I think this is really important, is that your emotional state affects how you learn and what you can remember. If you're anxious, you have something in your body called adrenaline, and it starts pumping. Adrenaline makes it actually really hard for your brain to transmit messages. So the neurotransmitters are basically the things that send messages between these neurons. If you're stressed out, it's really tough for those messages to get through. And if you've ever blanked out on a test because you were too stressed, now you know why. You also have something in your body called endorphins. When your body produces endorphins, it means you're relaxed. It means that you're happy. If you practice, if you know how to produce those calming hormones, it'll help you lower your stress level and learn better and repeat what you've learned accurately. So it's really important that you try not to be you don't make yourself anxious in many different ways. So you need to find a balance. Don't fall behind in your work or cram, but also don't spend all your time doing stuff you don't really want to do. You need to be able to relax and socialize and enjoy yourself so that you have endorphins as well. Find your balance. So, quick summary. Make sure you practice something as soon as you can after you've learned it, and do even more practicing within 24 hours. In a traditional classroom, that's why after a lesson, you typically have time to do some practice material, and then you do your homework that night. That is following the theory of how we learn according to brains. Try to practice math every day. Reinforce those connections. You do lose them if you don't practice them. I used to know an awful lot of things that I don't know anymore because I haven't practiced them. Recognize early how much you need to review. If you know that you sort of maybe understood some math from last year, that's not going to help you form those new dendrite connections. So make sure you review material and reinforce the learning you did last year so that the new learning has a place to stick. Always manage your anxiety and stress as much as possible. Your body just doesn't function well, and especially your brain doesn't function when you're really anxious. And for many reasons, learn a way of relaxing yourself. Deep breathing if you have test anxiety. Make sure that you have a way of finding balance and comfort in your life. And some tips around studying. Make sure you do something when you study. Nothing is worth to me as a teacher than when a student studies by looking at things. Oh, there's a question, yep, I know how to do it. There's another question, I know how to do it. You have to do something when you study. Make study cards, draw pictures, solve a lot of problems. Check your understanding by explaining something. Create a practice test. Actively studying is the only way to study. Here's some links if you want to learn more about that biology stuff. And just, it's really important that I mention here, I am in no way a neuroscientist. I'm not a brain scientist. I've just done a bit of research and found this slideshow, which I edited for me. So I hope that you take from this what you need and learn how to learn really well and enjoy using your brain.